Hi, everyone, and welcome to Introduction to Finding Grants. My name's Christine Bunting. I'm the Curriculum Design Manager here at Foundation Center. But all you need to know about me for your purposes is that I will be behind the scenes facilitating, supporting this webinar. So without further ado, I want to turn things over to Brian Schultz, who's going to be our presenter today. He's the Community Outreach Manager at Foundation Center's Cleveland branch, and I know you're in for a treat. He is very well versed in this material and is an engaging presenter. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Brian to further introduce himself and for us to get off and running.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're having a great day. And so what we're going to do today is an hour presentation, and it will go quickly. So I'll try and fit everything in, but I'll also try not to speak too fast for everyone. And we'll be going over Introduction to Finding Grants. And this is a basic introduction to the grant seeking process. And again, as Christine said, I'm Brian Schultz. I'm the Community Outreach Manager at one of our hubs in Cleveland, Ohio, and I oversee the Midwest region. And one reason I'm doing this Introduction to Finding Grants course is I love philanthropy and the ins and outs of it. I also work with a local group of family foundations in a collaborative group, and I go on site visits with them, and they share knowledge of their process, and I share knowledge of the nonprofit process as well from everything I hear. And I also work on a United Way funding committee as well. So I have a little bit of background in grant making and do some grant making in a volunteer process and way. And so that kind of helps my knowledge of Introduction to Finding Grants as well. And so without further ado, we will learn about the 10 most important things you need to know about finding grants. And again, this is a basic overview. It is not comprehensive of everything, but I hope that you will come away with a lot of knowledge today and a great beginning to your grant seeking process. So what we're going to talk about today is demystifying some of the biggest myths when you look for grants and when you've heard of grants. And so I'm assuming almost everyone on this webinar has heard that you can get a grant for anything. And I'm sorry to say that's just not true. You cannot receive a grant for anything. However, I am excited to tell you that there are grants available to nonprofits and 501c3s that are doing great work in their community. So grants are out there, but you can't get one for every single thing. The other thing we'd like you to know is that just a few big grants will not support your nonprofit organization alone. It would be great if you could just find a few very large size grants. But overall in the nonprofit sector, you need multiple streams of income to support your nonprofit. And so our number one is that you can't survive on grants alone. And this slide kind of helps show my point. And the source is Giving USA 2016. This is from the Giving USA Foundation. And you can go online and look at some of their research. They do a lot of great work. And every year they go over what are the private contributions, charitable contributions in the United States by their source. And so this pie is showing you that we do have foundation giving at 16%, and that's really great, but it's just a piece of the overall pie. And I won't spend too long on this chart, but I do like to show and talk about a few things. And so foundation giving in 2016 was at 16%, which is $58.5 billion, and that is a very large amount. And we did see tremendous growth as well in giving. Bequests, which is a gift that someone can leave at the end of their life, those are growing in the nonprofit sector. However, that relationship usually starts a while before, so it's not just a phone call. That is something that is a relationship and takes a long time to grow. And some nonprofits have become very good at receiving bequests. And so that's 8% of this pie. And then 5% of this pie is corporate giving and corporations. And so I will say the one difference here is that a corporate foundation will fall within the 16% of foundations. And that is when a corporation, there are many national corporations who have foundations, and you could probably name a few of them. And that would fall in the 16% of the pie. Where the 5% falls in is corporate giving programs, which we will talk a little bit about. Also marketing, the money can come to nonprofits from a marketing department of a corporation, and then from other departments of a corporation as well, which could be numerous different departments depending on the corporation. If they're interested in STEM or STEAM learning, they could give money through that department to certain nonprofits as well. So the great thing about corporations is there are different areas and venues to receive money. The one downside I would say is finding the right person and the email and making that request. But we do have a class on corporate giving if you're interested in that section. And then the biggest part of this pie, which you can see overwhelmingly, is individual giving. And we won't talk much about individual giving today because we're talking about foundation giving, but individual giving sits at 71% of the pie with $264.6 billion. So obviously it's a very large section, and having that income stream and knowing that individuals are out there and that they do give in the United States is something you want to take away and have knowledge in. Also, people always ask, well, are these the biggest individuals such as Bill Gates? And yes, we do have very wealthy individuals who give. However, a lot of their money is in the foundation portion. And this portion of individuals is people like me and you. So it's everyday individuals who contribute maybe $1,000 to $3,000 annually, and we make up a big portion of this individual giving pie. So it's just something you want to think about when you are thinking over what are the contributions, where is your money coming from, and what are those income sources. And then number two, not all foundations are alike. So there's a very common saying in philanthropy that if you have met one foundation or one person at a foundation, then you have met one foundation. And so this just means that all foundations are different. They have varying sizes, interests, and motivations. And so you don't want to base your knowledge off of one foundation on all foundations because they do have varying interests and motivations. And we'll go a little bit about that. We'll go over that a little bit in depth and what the foundations are like. And so we get into that. We have private foundations. And so we'll talk a little bit about what this means and what are the main types. And so in our private foundations, we have independent foundations. And so many of you have probably heard of family foundations. And overall, when a lot of people talk about independent or private foundations, they are talking about the vast majority, which are family foundations. And usually family foundations can have high degree of family involvement. It really depends again on the type and structure. So some of you may know of some of the largest family foundations in the country, and I'll let you internally guess what those might be. I'll name a few, such as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, that is a family foundation. The Kellogg Foundation is another family foundation. The Gates Foundation, or I already said Gates, the MacArthur Foundation, so some of those. And you probably know a lot about smaller family foundations in your area that really care about local causes and might give smaller size grants. And so those can be a great source of grants because they know your local area, they care, and they're investing as well. And then we have company-sponsored foundations. So I briefly mentioned these, and these are corporate foundations. And so these are the funds that come from a for-profit business. And usually company-sponsored foundations, corporate foundations, have certain areas that they give to or reasons for their giving. And so when we talk about these foundations, you want to know what their interest is, what they give to. For example, the PNC Foundation, which is a bank-sponsored foundation, they give to early childhood initiatives. And so if you do not fit within that, then you'd have to look for other sources. And then some company foundations they give overall. So it really depends, and you want to look at their structure. And then we have operating foundations. And so I usually say that when you hear of or see an operating foundation, most likely you would want to stay away from that. An operating foundation may award a few grants, but generally they give to their own organization or own causes. And so some examples are the Getty Fund of the Getty Museum, and they primarily give to themselves. However, they might have fellowships, internships, and they might do some small grants around the community for murals and artistic purposes. And then we move on to number 3. So foundations, this is good news for all of us. Foundations must give money away. So yes, as I said, all foundations are different. However, they do have to give money away. And they are required by the IRS to give a minimum of 5% of their prior year's assets away. And so this is great knowledge that if you are approaching a foundation or researching foundations, they do have to give their money away. Some of them give much more than 5% a year. The average is usually 6 to 8%. However, some foundations give 20 to 40%, depending on if they're a spend down foundation and they will be spending their money within their lifetime, or if they're a legacy foundation, which means that they will be giving throughout. And so that is something that you might want to know and you can look at. But again, foundations must give money away. So this is a great aspect for the nonprofit sector. And then I'll briefly go over other types of grant makers. We talked about private foundations, and now we'll talk about direct corporate giving programs. So really the difference between a corporate foundation and a direct corporate giving program is that a corporation has a fund, they have a direct corporate giving program, but they do not have an established foundation. And so some of the rules and the 5% rule does not apply. It is also harder to track direct corporate giving programs. So when I show you, hopefully I'll be able to show you our database, Foundation Directory Online Professional. You will see a lot of direct corporate giving programs. You might see for asset size and giving, not available for information. It doesn't mean that they don't have money, and it doesn't mean that they don't give money. It just means it can be much harder to track that in any given year. So if a corporation has a great year, they can give a lot of money at once, or if they're not having a great year, they can decide how much money is being given out. One example of a direct corporate giving program here in Ohio, we have the Abercrombie & Fitch company, and they have a direct corporate giving program. And so they primarily give in Ohio, they're headquartered in Columbus, and they give to youth and education. And they decide which grants through their direct corporate giving program will benefit, and then if they do matching with employee contributions as well. And then we have grant-making public charities. So many of you have probably heard of grant-making public charities in the form of community foundations. And so what are the public charities that make in your community? You can think of what your community foundation is, and your community foundation primarily gives in a specific community or region, or for a cause. So for example, here in Cleveland, we have the Cleveland Foundation, which is the world's oldest and one of the largest community foundations at $2.4 billion in giving. And they only give in a few counties here in the area. And so you can think of what community foundations you have and what they give to. There are also some community foundations that give to a specific cause as well. They're issue oriented. And you can think of some other funds that are issue-oriented. So the Global Fund for Women, the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research are examples of population or issue-based foundations. And so these foundations raise money and then they give it out. And that's what a grant-making public charity is. Whereas a private foundation, the money comes from an endowment and they do not raise funds from the public. And so that is a difference. And so primarily, as I said, private foundations, family foundations, that money has come from personal wealth, however they made their money, and they have decided to give a portion of it to causes through their foundation. And so they will not fundraise. Whereas a grant-making public charity, you will hear about fundraising causes. Your community foundation might raise money through the community or through wealthy individuals as well. And so they're grant-making public charities that raise money and then give it out. And then what are the funder motivations for these foundations? I've talked about it a little bit, but I will go a little more in depth. And so private foundations primarily want to fulfill their philanthropic goals and interests while supporting a variety of issues through an objective process. And so when we talk about family foundations can vary again in size and scope. And so in one geographic area, they might only give to a few neighborhoods or to a city, or some family foundations that are very large might give throughout the United States, or they might only give in a few geographic locations. Maybe some of the family went to college somewhere and so they want to support that community, or they have a vacation home in another area and they want to give grant making where they also vacation. I don't think there are a lot of vacation homes people have in Cleveland, especially with our cold weather, but some of your areas might have family members who do vacation and support your local areas as well. And then corporations tend to focus more on branding, visibility, and their corporate social responsibility. So usually with a corporation, again, it can fit their topic area, what they really care about. Patagonia has a corporate foundation and they tend to give to environmental causes and what they're interested in. The other thing you might want to think about is in-kinding, and some corporations produce many products, and so they can in-kind some of those gifts to you. For example, I'm thinking of Sherwin-Williams, which produces paint, and you can go online and fill out a simple form and see if you're trying to repaint your building or the inside of your nonprofit, they might be able to in-kind a large amount of paint to you. Other places, such as Chipotle, might be able to in-kind food to you or a lunchtime meal for one of your events. So think about it in that way as well. Corporations do tend to like in-kind gifts. And then again, we're talking about grant-making public charities. And so typically, if you have a community foundation, they want to make an impact on their region. Usually their grants and gifts are responsive to the community as a whole. So we call them generalists and experts. It could be in health and the arts and neighborhoods, and they know many different topics and give to many different initiatives in their community. Whereas if we're talking about more of a specific foundation or fund like the Global Fund for Women, they would give to women internationally, and that is their interest and what they raise money for and give to for their population group. So depending on what area you're working in and what population groups, you might want to look at some of those national and international public charities that might be good fits for grants in if you're looking at a specific issue area, if you're looking at research, or if you're in a community and you're doing great work, you can look to your community foundation. Another great thing about community foundations are they are usually experts of their community, they're out and about. It is easier to connect with them in most cases. And so you can have conversations but also they really care about the community as a whole. And so community foundations are a great place to connect, and they do a lot of different research depending, and so you can connect in to them as well. And then number 4, grant making or grant writing is never about the need of your organization. So when I'm out in the community, I see a lot of people fall into certain traps, and when you need money for your nonprofit, and we're all hopefully doing really great work and impactful work in the community, you talk about the need of your organization. So you need to keep the lights on, you need gas money for your vehicles, you need salaries. But when you're approaching and talking to funders, you want to talk about what are you doing for the community and what is the need of the community and how are you fulfilling that need? And so that's kind of where you want to have that information go. And maybe I always say that a 30-second spiel on what are the needs of the community and how are you helping to fulfill those needs? Those really resonate with people, not only funders, but when you really just focus on what is the need of your organization, we need the lights and we need printing materials and we need funds for this and that, it doesn't resonate with people as much. So when you do grant writing, when you have conversations, you really want to focus on the need of the community. How are you helping that need? And you want to make sure that you are aware of community needs and you are the best organization to do that work. And in those conversations, you should know what are the community needs and have that knowledge available. And then when we talk about that, we kind of go into the point of credibility. And so I like to ask in my live audiences, and you are a live audience, what do you think we mean by credibility? And when we say credibility, we mean, are you a legal nonprofit? Do you have a compelling mission that is compatible with the funder's focus area? Do you have strong leadership? Some people like to say that a lot of funders and even individuals, we fund leadership and we fund people. And so do you have strong leadership? Are they visible in the community? Do people follow them? That matters for some funders as well. And do you provide high quality programs that meet a real need in the community and in your community? The other thing we talk about when we look at credibility is, do you have a strong organizational and financial infrastructure? And so you want to make sure that your organization is strongly structured, but also the financial infrastructure is there. Funders will ask for financial information and statements and look at that as well as part of their decision process. And then number 5, so do your homework first. You never want to approach a grant maker unprepared. When seeking a grant, you must know as much as possible about the particular foundation before you plan to approach them. However, when I say this, you don't have to read a whole book about this foundation, but it is good to know a few facts. For example, with our community foundation here in Cleveland, as I said when I named them, they are the world's first community foundation. That would be an important fact to know about them if I'm approaching them. So for some family foundations, you might want to know, what are their key interests? Do they love the arts? Where did their money come from, if that matters, in their background and bio? And I will show you on Foundation Directory Online Professional where you can find some of this information and what is listed to see what might resonate with them. The other thing when we talk about doing your homework is that you want to know, do they fund your geographic location? What size of grants are they giving out? So if you're looking for grants that are ranging between $5,000 and $10,000, you might not approach a foundation that only gives $50,000 grants and above. Or if you're looking for a very large grant from one individual foundation, such as a $100,000 grant, then you wouldn't want to approach and ask a foundation that only gives $5,000 grants. And again, on Foundation Directory Online Professional, I can show you the range of giving and the size of grants that are average for each foundation. So that information is great to know. And what are the interests of that foundation? Do you fit within their scope of giving? And I hear a lot from funders that one of the biggest reasons a proposal is rejected is because the nonprofit did not do the correct research and they don't give to that topic, or they don't give in that geographic region. And so you want to make sure you're doing that research because you don't want to waste your time either. Writing a proposal can be time consuming and you want to make sure that that's all done. Now, as I say that, I know everyone is very busy, so thank you for taking time out in this webinar to listen to this, but also spending time to do research and doing that homework can be daunting for some people. But I really think that it does pay off if you spend the time to do some of that research, find out the information, and then approach the right foundations. And so numerous studies have been done where, say, if you send out 100 cold proposals where you know nothing about the foundations, they don't know you, you don't know their names, things like that, or who you're addressing. Some people like to do that because they think they might get 1 or 2 grants, but you've just spent time and mailing and 100 proposals are going online. Whereas if you targeted 8 to 10 foundations and did some of that background research, you knew they were good fits and you applied to them, the likelihood and chance of getting funding is much higher and creating a relationship. So when we talk about finding funding and doing that research, you also want to find foundations that you can create that relationship with and that it's lasting. So I always like to say it's much like dating, and you just want to find out if you're a fit and building that relationship, if you're a match or not. And sometimes you're not a match, and that's okay. But if you find that out in the research phase, then you don't have to spend time developing a proposal and sending it out to that funder. And then, so this kind of goes within that. Our number 6 is the one size fits all approach does not work. So to be effective at finding grants, you must create an individual strategy for each potential funder and tailor that proposal around who you're approaching and why. And again, I will say a lot of funders are moving into different realms and they know that their work connects with other issues. And so a funder who might fund the arts, an interest in arts programs, may know that funding the arts for aging communities or in schools is great and may impact their work. However, you want to know what really is important to them. And if it's the aspect of the arts, you really want to play up the arts in your proposal and then everything else as well. So one thing we see, or I see in my work with nonprofits, is usually we're great at talking about what we're best at and what we really care about, but you also want to make sure, depending on the program and what funder you're approaching, that you're also talking about the work that they care about and highlighting that work. And so if they really care about the arts, what section of your program, why are you approaching them, and really highlight that arts aspect as well. So that's just a piece of advice for me, but I will say that one size and one proposal does not work for every funder. It's a lot like applying to jobs, and you kind of curate and edit your resume and your cover letter to fit that funder. And so in the same way you would, or to fit the job. So in the same way you would edit the introduction and conclusion of your proposal to fit the funder. The nice thing is, though, that if you are applying for a program and similar grants, then the bulk of your proposal would be the same information. But again, make sure that you are editing that information, changing the names of the foundation. So if you're copying and pasting, make sure you're going back and looking at all of that before you send it, and making sure that you are speaking to that foundation and really grabbing their attention in their introduction, and then having a strong closeout in the conclusion of your proposal. So we're currently at the halfway mark, and I hope that everyone so far has learned something and you're still on board. And we're going to go on number 7. To get the grant, you have to find the right match. And so that's why we really talk about research and why research is the most essential part of grant seeking. So if you really take anything away from this program today, I really hope that you take away that research and doing some of that legwork is very important, and it's a good use of your time because you can really establish a match with your nonprofit organization to a foundation by really discovering what their mission and activities are and how it matches what your mission and activities are. And so again, the ultimate goal is not just for a one-time grant. I think ideally for everyone, the goal would be to create a partnership between your organization and the foundation, so you can help solve the problems that you both really care about and those community issues, and so that you are creating a relationship between each other. And hopefully it would be a lasting relationship. And again, when we talk about finding the right match and doing that research, it's not always about monetary gain. And so grants are great and nonprofits need grants to survive. But again, think of it, some of these foundations have a lot of information on their local communities or their issue areas. And so you can talk to some of the staff there, and if you gain that relationship, you can gain social capital. They may suggest what organizations would be great to collaborate with, and you can become a partner at the table. And again, not all foundations are interested in those types of partnerships, but some foundations are, and it can get you a seat at a table for a collaborative process that your community might be doing, or learning more information from experts, or asking the foundation to connect you to other funders who might be a great fit as well, locally or nationally. So again, when I really talk about this, I think that the research really connects and ties into relationships and relationship building. And in philanthropy, just as in any other area, relationships really do matter and are important. And so we will go through, again, Foundation Center's Foundation Directory online, and you can create customized searches based on geographic areas, the area of interest and the population you serve, and the support that you need. And so I will go into that in a little bit, and we can see how you can kind of create a search and find the research and what funders really fit. So again, don't be afraid of the process and doing that research and finding that fit. And so we're asking the questions of who funds in your region, the support you need, and the area of interest. And now we'll go on to number 8. So asking for the right amount of money. So again, I'm gonna hammer away at the word research and how we should all be doing our research. You wanna find out, has the foundation, the grant maker that you're looking at, have they funded organizations like yours? And you can search and find what grants they've given. You can actually search for nonprofit organizations in our database as well and see what grants they've received. So that's a nice way to complement what you do by seeing what nonprofits that are similar to you, where is their funding come from, how much and for what. And also sometimes I say you can look at nonprofit websites and annual reports, and they'll thank their funders as well. So you can get kind of a prospect list of different funders and then do that research on your own and see if they'd be a good fit for your nonprofit. And then the big question is, how much money should you ask for? And again, I think the dream would be that we could get a few big grants, and that would be the end of our search and work, and we'd have our big grants for a nonprofit. And some organizations can receive very big grants and do receive them. But for the majority of nonprofit organizations, you need numerous amounts of grants, and they can range anywhere from $500 to $20,000 to $50,000. And so that range matters in what you should ask for. And just because a foundation may give million-dollar grants, and some foundations do, and one just gave a $100 million grant recently, it does not mean that because they give a $1 million grant that you'll be able to receive a $1 million grant. And so you want to look at what is your relationship with that funder. Is it a first time ask? Have you been asking them for years? Are you a partner with them? How much money do they generally tend to give? Are their grants $5,000 to $10,000? Do they like to give bigger size grants? What are they giving that money for? And so you want to do that research, and you can look on our database comparing several years worth of grant lists as well. But we have a great feature now that tells you what their average amount of grant that they give is. Again, it is an average, so you really want to look, and if you are doing a great program and it looks like they give in a certain range of $50,000 and that's the grant you're going after, then obviously you would do that work. But if it looks like $5,000 is a great range for your organization, that foundation, you just want to make sure that you're asking for the right amount. Another question that I get a lot is, sometimes you can ask the funder, what is the amount and what is that right amount, especially with community foundations. And so you can give them a little example or tell them what your program looks like, and then ask them the question, how much funding do you think is appropriate for that, or what is the right amount to ask for? The biggest thing, if you are able to ask and you are able to get that question out, then ask for the amount that they tell you. If they tell you $20,000, don't ask for $50,000 because it's appearing that you did not listen to them. So again, if you're asking these questions or doing this research, make sure that you're following those guidelines as well. And so number 9, you don't need to know someone to get a grant, but it can help you get your foot in the door. And again, as I said, relationship building is very important. And so when we talk about this, and when I show you how you can do some of this research, you could find out who works at the foundation or who the trustees are, and I can show you how to do that in Foundation Directory online. And then you could give that list of board members of that foundation or trustees and staff members to your nonprofit board or to your staff and ask if anyone knows someone at that foundation. Again, sometimes we could name a foundation and your staff might be like, I don't know anyone who works there. But if you can give people a concrete list of names, sometimes the name might resonate and they might not even know that that person is on the board of that foundation or works at that foundation, and they might know them in some context, like, oh, we play golf together, or our kids go to school together and I know them and whatnot. And so if you do have that relationship and someone has that knowledge, especially a board member, it's great to outreach to that person via phone call, via an email, and just be short and concise and say, if you're a board member, I'm a board member on this great nonprofit organization. This is why. We've done some research, and we will be approaching you within the next few weeks to apply for a grant, and we think this is why you're a great fit for us. And I just wanted you to know that we will be approaching you for a grant or submitting a proposal. And so again, you're not bypassing the process. Foundations are transparent, so you want to go through the process of submitting and applying the way that their process is laid out, if that's online, or you can see how that process is. But it's great to be able to make that outreach to someone who is at the foundation if you have that relationship, and just say that you will be applying and see what they say as well. And again, it doesn't mean that you'll automatically get the grant, but it means that you've connected, and sometimes in a proposal, even if you've talked to someone at the foundation, you can list their name and kind of make that connection more clear as well. So number 10, the proposal is typically not the first thing a foundation wants. And so when we go through Foundation Directory online, you'll find out what might be some of the things that a foundation wants before. And that could be a letter of inquiry, which you may also commonly hear an LOI. Some people call it a letter of intent as the initial approach. And so usually a letter of inquiry or a letter of intent is they all mean the same thing, and they're usually 2 pages or sometimes 1 page, and they're mini versions of your proposal. So some foundations will require a letter of inquiry first, and then they will let you know if they want you to submit a full proposal. Now, in my personal opinion, I love letters of inquiry because usually they're easier to create, they take less time, and then you can see if it's a potential fit right away with that funder, and you're not making a full-blown proposal, and you're seeing if there's interest. And usually if there is interest, it gives you a greater chance of getting a grant as well. And so we'll see that in Foundation Directory, it will say how they want to be approached. Do they want a full proposal? Do they want an LOI first? And how do they want to be approached? The other thing that we do like to say is that to try and make a phone call, unless they specifically state no phone calls, please. And some foundations do state that they do not want phone calls, or they'd like you to submit that LOI first. And some foundations, you won't even find their cell phone listed or their phones listed. Some foundations have PO boxes. So it really does depend on the foundation and the nature. But if you are making a phone call, try and keep it brief and concise, to the point. Don't get too nervous. You can test it out beforehand and practice a few times, but you also want to sound authentic and genuine. Usually you would just state your name, your organization, why you're calling, that you're looking to apply for a grant, why you think it's a fit, and what the geographic, it can be, what is the connection? So is it via geographics? Do they fund in your area? Do they fund the similar cause that you are working in? So just make sure that's where some of the research really comes into play, and having that brief phone call and seeing if there's any interest. And they might say, we love that idea, please apply, or please send an LOI. They may pass you on to someone at the foundation who might be able to tell you a little bit more about the process. But I do say that if there is a phone number and they don't specifically say no phone calls, please, that it can be a great way to touch base with that foundation and make an impression. Again, you do not want to have the phone call go on for 10 minutes unless they want it to and they're keeping the conversation going, but really just be brief and concise and know what the purpose of the phone call is for you. Because again, everyone is very busy, and so if you can keep it brief, concise, and get the knowledge that you want out of the phone call, that can be great. But always be well prepared and respect a funder's time. And so that takes us through our top 10, and we will briefly go over the key takeaways, but the webinar is not done. I am going to take you through Foundation Directory Online Professional to show you how you can do a lot of the research that I talked about. And so some of our key takeaways for this webinar on Introduction to Finding Grants is, can you prove that you are a credible nonprofit? Do you have your legal status? Do you have a great leadership team? Do you have a board in place? All of those things that make you credible. And then finding the right fit. What is the match? And what does that look like? And again, you want to focus on the funder's motivations and interests. Show why the program you're doing or the work you're doing is a great fit, and what is the impact in the community, and why should they be interested? Because it is competitive to receive a grant, and so you want to make sure that you have that connection and you can show that motivation. And then you always want to be prepared, know who you're approaching and why. And again, it's to a point. You're not always going to know every single person that may work at the foundation. But when you make a phone call, you want to know what the reason of your phone call is, have the knowledge with you in case they ask a question about the program, and make sure that you have that available for yourself. And so these are key takeaways, but I am going to transition to Foundation Directory Online Professional to make sure that you can see how you can do some of the research this way. And so right now, this is Foundation Directory Online Professional. This is the page that you would see if you log into the database. I would also like to say that there are over 400 public libraries in the United States that have this database accessible for free as part of our relationship with them. They're called FINS, Funding Information Networks. And I'm sure that if you, when you receive your email, you'll receive a link where you can look and type in your zip code and find out what location is closest to you. If you do not access a public library or one of our centers in the United States, one of the Foundation Center hubs, then if you try and use this at home or at work, it is a paid-for, fee-based database. However, there are numerous ways and numerous locations where you could use this for free to do research. If you've never seen Foundation Directory Online Professional, it really is a great resource, and I do have some bias here, but you can also see we say new and professional, so we've recently updated this and what it looks like. And so I'm going to do a few examples for you to see how you could do that research and what that looks like. The nice thing is this is a very intuitive database. And so our main search right here says describe what you're trying to fund, and we give you examples. So ballet school in New York City, animal shelter in Portland, or food pantry in Dallas. And for this example, I'm going to do a broad example and say arts in Ohio. So maybe I'm an organization, a nonprofit organization that works throughout all of Ohio, and I am very interested in work within the spectrum of arts funding. And so this is my basic search. And you can type in numerous different searches and geographies into this basic search and do the search. The other thing I'm going to show you is that you could click on include federal US funders. So if you want to see federal funding, for this search, I'm not going to include the federal funders. And I usually say that when you first do your search, do it without, and then if you want to do your search again and include federal funders if you're interested in federal funding, it's a great way to see those searches as well. And then I'm going to do our search. And so what you can see here is that we did the basic search of arts in Ohio, and it says showing results for arts education, art museums, visual arts in Ohio, United States. Now, always look at the results and see what it came up in your search. If you wanted to edit these, you could. So say that I don't want funding for art museums. I'm a small nonprofit, and so I'm not interested in funding for art museums. The geographic location, I do agree with Ohio, but if I want to get more specific, I could delete that and look at a city or county. If I wanted to get even more specific, I could look at what population I serve and type that in as well. And again, so geographic focus is where will the funding be used? I'd be using this funding in the state of Ohio. Location is location of a grant maker or a nonprofit recipient. So if I put Cleveland, Ohio, and did the search without a geographic focus and just focused on the location, it would mean that the grant maker would have to have a physical address in Cleveland, Ohio. So there are numerous ways to do this search, but what it shows us, and numerous ways to find additional filters as well, and I'll let you look at those so you can do grant amounts, the years, it always will start 2003 to 2018. The grant information, some of it is readily available from 2017, some will be 2016. And then we look at type of support strategies, transaction types, and organization types. But for this search, I'm just going to keep going down. And arts in Ohio, I knew this would be a big one. So we have 1,000 grant makers. So if I wanted to narrow that, I could go back to what we use and really narrow it down. Maybe I don't want to look at all the years from 2003. I want to see 2012 to make sure that the funders I'm looking at still do fund the arts. I could even go higher than 2012 as well. And so I can do that search. I could change it based on grant amounts and based on different types. So you can already see by changing the years, I now have 532 grant makers. Still a lot of grant makers, but it's a much easier search. And again, I could even get more specific. If I was looking at a city or county, I would assume that the amount of grant makers would be less depending on that geographic region. But arts, education, and healthcare are some of the highest funded things in philanthropy and interest. So I knew arts grant makers, there would be numerous. So what we're also seeing is we have our grant makers. I could view the grant makers list. I could view the grants. And these are grants that they have given in the arts and in arts education, visual arts. And so that's specifically what we're looking at. How many recipients? So that means how many nonprofit organizations have received these grants. And then 990 tax forms, which I won't go into. But if you are familiar and want to look at 990 tax forms, you can do that as well. So then we list our grant makers, and you'll see we have the cities here along with the states. Again, you can see that we have the PNC Foundation, which is in Pittsburgh, because that's where they're physically located. However, PNC is a corporate foundation that gives in multiple states, and so they do give in Ohio, and that's why they're listed. We show their total assets as of the last fiscal year that we have for them, then their total giving, and so that is total giving in that fiscal year. So if the fiscal year is 2016, because information lags behind with the IRS, so that will be total giving in that fiscal year. And then what I think is really great is the amount funded. And so this is showing the amount funded in the arts, and it is looking at specifically what has been funded in the arts in our search. And so that's the amount funded, and that is from the years 2012 to, I would say, around 2016 or 2017, depending on when our grant data is from. And then you could click on and look at the grants count. And then if you go down, you can also see a sampling of the grants. You can see a sampling of the recipients and the tax forms. Very briefly, before we end this and before I turn it over to Christine, I am going to click on a foundation. And so this will look similar, and all of the profiles look similar. The information obviously might be a little bit different, but what you'll see is at the top, the title of the foundation, where they're located. If they do have a website, I will say 60% of the grant makers on this database do not have a website. So it's a great reason to use this database and do that searching. Who's who, which is great. We talked about how to make that connection. So if you clicked on who's who, it would show me who are the board members at the Cleveland Foundation and who's the staff. And if they do have a LinkedIn account, then you could automatically click on that LinkedIn account and it would open their LinkedIn. And then it shows you their contact information. So again, the who's who's great to print out a list and show your staff or your board if asked if they know anyone, or if you want to know more about who works there and you want to click on their LinkedIn account. Then we see what is being funded at this foundation, and you can click on any of these to see more in-depth information. Where is the money going? So I said the Cleveland Foundation is a community foundation, so the majority is going to Ohio, but you can see there are grants to other states, and that is because some of their individual funds do grant elsewhere. And then how big are the grants? So this is where we're looking at what is the amount that this foundation gives in grants. And this is all for the last 5 years. And then we're seeing what the most common grant amount is $5,000. It's showing us recipients, and it's all in the realm of arts funding. And so we're seeing arts nonprofits that have been funded, and we could click on that to really look at the descriptions and find more information about that specific grant. Then you can find the funding interests, and this will show, and you can open them as well to see what other interests they have. What I love is it shows you other funders to consider. So you could click on, and this is based on similar patterns of giving. So what you put in for geographic area, grant amount, and subject area. So you can see what other funders are there. Click on them and it'll take you to that foundation. It shows you the applications. So how would you apply to this foundation, and if they have a request for proposals out. So right now we're saying no request for proposals exist. Where is their giving limited to? So again, if their giving is limited to a certain geographic area and you don't fit in within that area, then most likely you'd want to move on and find another funder that does fit for you. So this is where the research really comes into play. You want to look at their giving limitations and make sure that you fit within their limitations. And then you can look at their financials if you'd like to see their total asset size, total giving, and then again, the who's who. So this is showing us who are the officers and directors of the Cleveland Foundation. This is the president. We can click on their LinkedIn if we'd want to see that. And then if we go down, we can see their staff as well. And so we could look at the staff and see where we fit and click on their LinkedIns to view that information. Then we have publications, and at the bottom we have the information listed again with their contact. So again, this is just a very quick look at Foundation Directory Online Professional, the things you can do with it. There's a lot more that I did not show you, but I think this is a great research tool, a great way to find more prospective funders in your geographic area. And so feel free to go to one of our funding information network partners, one of the local libraries by you, and use this database. And hopefully this would really help you in terms of finding more opportunities and grant funding for your nonprofit. And so I will turn this over to Christine.
Thank you, Brian. I really appreciate it. So thank you for that great tour of FDO and a range of really informative tips. And I know, Brian, you can't, since you're presenting, you can't see all the questions that came in, but we got a lot of questions and great feedback. So I know everyone's going to be thinking through how you can write those LOIs, reach out to funders, and do some research on Foundation Directory online. So I did just include in our chat, and I'll also include it in the link that will be sent out tomorrow, a link for accessing FDO for free at any of our locations, both with our Funding Information Network locations and our offices around the country. So again, that's grantspace.org/findus. Also, I know that you guys are going to have questions after this webinar is over. So I'll also paste in the chat, and I'll also include a link tomorrow to our Ask Us service. So this is actually a way you can chat with our librarians online. So as you have questions about whether you're starting a nonprofit, you're fundraising, you're seeking a grant, if you have questions and you search for your answers on GrantSpace and you can't find a good answer, you can also talk to a real human being, which is so refreshing this day and age. So just wanted to provide those tips to you. And I did have one question, Brian, that came in that I thought you might be able to speak to. Catherine asked, do you have to pay a fee to apply for grant money?
So that is a great question. And with foundations, you do not have to pay a fee to apply for grant money. And so you would reach out to that foundation, look at their website or look at our database, see how you would apply, and then you would send in your information. And so if something is asking you, and there are numerous websites, and you really do want to be careful in grant websites that will tell you if you pay $100, you'll be able to get whatever amount of money in grants and things like that. And so you want to make sure that these are actual reputable sources and that foundations do not charge you money to apply for that grant. Now,
Awesome.
scholarships
Thank
and
you.
prizes and awards, that could be a different story, but for foundation grants, you should not be paying money to apply.
Okay, great. Thank you. I thought that was a question worth answering to the group. So I want to wrap things up here by thanking everyone for attending today, and know that we do have some additional offerings. So those of you, as you're writing your proposals, you may attend our free Intro to Proposal Writing course, and you may also be interested in our proposal writing online course that we offer, as well as I know there were a number of questions about creating those meaningful relationships with funders, and we have a whole course on that as well. So I did just want to provide those links to you as well and highlight those. Thank you, everyone, and a big thank you to Brian. Thank you for your expertise for this hour and for sharing it with over 100 people.